The American Educational Research Association sent an email to all the editors of ARA publications asking them to use education research and not educational research. Now, this bothers me because I've always, since studying educational theory at the Institute of Education, this was really early on in the late 1960s, early 70s.
No.
Yes. But the view of educational theory was that it was made up of the philosophy, psychology, sociology of education. So this distinction between what is educational in terms of educational research and what is education research, so you can see that the sociologists of education, philosophers of education, in the 60s, 70s, and it wasn't until 83 that Hurst acknowledged he'd made a mistake, and that the mistake was in believing that the practical principles that I used as a science teacher, because I went to the Institute to study teaching science full-time during the day, that the practical principles that I used to explain my educational influence with my pupils, Hurst and Peters would say, well, those are at best pragmatic maxims that had a first loose and superficial justification in practice, that in any rationally developed theory, and this is the words, would be replaced by principles from the disciplines. So my practical principles that I use as an educator to explain my educational influence and the learning of my students would be replaced by the academic theories of educational theory. Are you okay with this in terms of why I'm so concerned that last night I couldn't understand how Dominic was using, and this is the president of the Educational Research Association, and he kept slipping to education research. And you'll see when you get his written presidential address. Now, what I'm just asking you, if you would, and I've got, this is great because I've got my address that I prepared for today, so you'll be able to access it at actionresearch.net, and it's a bit small at the moment. But if you go to the What's New section, you'll be able to access a full paper which goes through the arguments that I use. And I just want to build, just, if you like, it's 3 points really, but I think it will appeal to you in terms of what you know about your educational practice. That I don't believe that even when I was at the Association of Teacher Education in Europe, I was there 3 weeks ago at Laval University and had 3 keynotes, really excellent keynotes, but when you looked at their analysis, not one of them actually analysed an educational influence in anybody's learning. You know, there were keynotes, and Ian Ent gave a nice one, a eulogy to Jeff Whitty, there was Marcus, who gave this lovely analysis of teacher education, but nobody, none of the 3, actually focused on what counts as an educational explanation of influences in learning. Irma actually looked at massive networks across the world. It was a great analysis of different networks. UNESCO, she went through the European context, she went through the UK context, and there wasn't one piece of evidence that anybody had influenced anybody's learning, especially in terms of a notion of educational learning. And I just want to ask you whether this makes sense to you, that the explanations that I've offered over the last 30, 40 years, and you'll see from the website, if you go into this one here, this one on the left, you'll get over 40 doctorates that have been accepted all over the world in terms of practitioner researchers researching their own practice and explaining their educational influences in learning. So you've got all of those doctorates that have been legitimated by different universities actually to support the points I'm making today. But I just want to mention this idea about values, because I'm saying that each one of you, in terms of your educational practice, will recognise something, and this is a claim, you can test the validity of this, that as I'm speaking to you now, and this is part of my educational practice, I come to BERA, I go to ARA and other places, to actually test the validity of my explanations of my educational interest in learning. So this is part of my validity processes with you now. And I'm saying that when you think about your own practice as educators, that you'll recognise that the energy that, for example, I'm expressing in the here and now, because just being present with you evokes in me an energy which I say is a life-affirming energy, which I believe that you can actually, in terms of what Marion Dodds calls empathetic validity, the fact that you can actually experience me in the here and now, and the fact that after about 40 or 50 years in education, I'm still feeling I'm going strong with that energy. It's life-affirming. Yet, if you look at the research published in Birch, for example, as that is one example, nobody will connect, because the text is all prose, it's all written in a language that doesn't allow that visual. So what you're doing now is experiencing me with that flow of energy, which I'm saying is at the heart of the educational explanation of what I do and the influence I have, is actually missing from the academic publications about educational research and theory. Now that's one of my claims that I'm making, that you can actually test yourself now by reflecting on what it is that you experience of yourselves when you're actually in an educational relationship where you have taken, and this is crucial, you have taken responsibility towards another in terms of their own learning. But this is one of the key things about being an educator. My claim is, as an educational researcher, what is educational about your research? Partially, you've taken responsibility for your influence, your educational influence in the learning of somebody else, as well as yourself. And I can move on to saying about social formations as well, because I hold there are three issues that you concern yourself as an educational researcher. One is the educational influence in your own learning, the other educational influence in the learning of others, and the other is the educational influence in the learning of social formations. So can I just pause there, because this is crucial in terms of your response to what I've just said, the validity of actually claiming that you will recognise in yourselves and what you do a flow of what I call life-affirming energy, which has got to come into any explanation, any educational explanation that you offer for your influence in your own learning or the learning of others. So let me just pause there, just to see whether that actually resonates with something that you experience about yourselves. Yeah?
Were you asking me?
Yes, please.
I recall when I was a PhD student, having the professor in the statistics class literally sitting next to me, and that experience of we're sitting together, you're joining the community, that had energy, it was life-affirming for me. Working alongside, that meant a great deal to me. Now as a professor working with PhD students who fly in twice a term, the times that I hear, it's just not the same when I'm reading it in a book. It's so different from the class.
Right.
So I hope that's...
Yes, it is that, and yet, for you to be successful as a professor in a university, and particularly in this country, with a research assessment exercise, the research excellence framework, you've got to publish in these journals where you put everything into a text form. So it is exactly that, is it, which I'm saying is a major problem. Now, could I just ask, is there anybody else that can recognise, if you like, yes?
Sorry, I recognise what you say completely. My name is Samantha Taylor, I'm a lecturer in Queen's University Belfast. I'm an anatomist. My main role is to teach gross anatomy to undergraduate medical students. I've done a professional doctorate and graduated just at the end of last year. I want to publish from my work. I am a passionate advocate for what I do, and I'm very driven by what I do. I'm very lucky with my job. What I find is if I want to get into the more hard-hitting educational world of journals, it's very different from looking at the anatomical, more practical type of publications that there are out there. So what I want to do is use my experience in educational theory and all that I've learnt, but I don't see that Birch, for example, may be the right home, but I want to publish there. It's difficult. because the practical side of me as a teacher, I don't think that voice would come through there.
Yeah, and that's,
Possibly.
yeah, it is that issue that when you say your practical voice, I'm saying you express in an embodied sense, as I'm doing now, a kind of energy which is linked to your values. So when you say, I'm passionate about what you do. Now, almost all of my doctoral students, they actually love what they do. Now, they bring love as an academic standard of journey into their doctorates. So there's one about being loved into learning. And the use of video shows the expression of the energy that is linked to those values. You try and get that published in Merge, and the very logic that is used in the language, I'll guarantee also you'll be rejected. Because the very form that that journal takes, and a lot of them around the world, actually doesn't permit what I think everybody in this room knows about their educational influence and how you explain it. So this is so difficult because you've got key figures, I think, like Dominic yesterday, who, in his analysis, it was lovely, I enjoyed the analysis he gave, but at no point did he engage with what do I mean by educational research. The educational research was clear, and that's where you'll get published in most of the journals. But I'm just curious about whether or not we're denying something very important about how to have educational research, where we're in cultures that are actually denying the very qualities which we know as educational researchers and educators that we express. Okay? Yes?
I don't know whether this is connected, it's just you sparked a thought. So in the interview data that I've collected, it's about I feel embarrassed to put the things in that are about me that come out, and feelings, and I haven't included them. Oh, Angela's brilliant at doing this, she made me feel this way. It's like people won't be interested in that, I won't put that in. But actually, I am embarrassed by that. That's probably quite powerful.
Yeah, and it's that. I don't know if you know women's ways of knowing the text, because the women researchers actually visited the data that the male researcher, who was actually the director of the project, had eliminated from the analysis. The women went back to the original data and they created the text Women's Ways of Knowing. And it's exactly that you feel embarrassed. It took ages to get the I in the question, how do I improve my practice? Just think of that. How do I improve? That's a question I asked in 1967, very first class I took in the East End of London. I came out absolutely in despair because I wasn't communicating to the children. And I went home, God, I've got to improve. But how do I improve? The I, not the egotistical, but the I was there. It was vital. And it's actually research committees, ethics committees, for years rejected the possibility of getting the I in a research question. Now, actually, you can do that now. But you've still got places that actually ask you to remove the personal pronoun from your research question. Yeah. So it's exactly that I'm saying this is so difficult, because there's an embarrassment, as you said, I can't put myself in this, and the emotion, which is vital, and the energy. Now, in terms of, if you get into the actionresearch.net website, just actionresearch.net, okay, you'll be able to go into the living theory thesis and master's dissertations here on the left, and you'll be able to access what Liz Campbell, lovely, how has love influenced me as a teacher, researcher and educator? So Nipissing University in Canada, that's just recently gone through, and that being loved into learning is actually part of Liz's doctoral thesis, and she uses multimedia, she uses visual, video, painting, art as well to communicate her meaning. But if you just got into some of these, you'll actually see this one, South Africa, you've got Ireland, you've got so many. That was a business one. That was Australia, that's University of Western Sydney. Maria was here, how to evolve living educational theory praxis in living boundaries. Now you're going to access all of these, they're all freely available, but it's just to demonstrate the point that these have been legitimated, academically legitimated. So this is the embodied knowledge of educators, which has been made public and tested for the validity and legitimacy using these, what we call the standards of judgment, which are the values that you will be using, I believe, to make sense of what you do. But it's like you're saying, it is embarrassing. If you start to take it seriously, you'll end up by challenging, unfortunately, because it's difficult, this. If I stood up last night and said, look, Dominic, I don't think you understand, you're the president of the British Educational Research Association, I'm not sure you understand, or you certainly haven't told me tonight, what you're meaning by education. Now, you can imagine what offence I would have caused last night if I'd stood up in that, and actually said what I was feeling. And this is not easy to do, but you've got, as I say, the evidence that this has been done. Could you just go to the home page, just the home page, please? Because I'm hoping that you will access, you won't be able to see this, I don't think. Okay, so is it on this right-hand side? If you go into this is the analysis that I'm using to justify some of the claims that I've just made. Now, down here, if you just go down here to actually, this is the ALARA conference in Split in Croatia, where these ideas are going to be put forward again. Could you go down to the living theory? This was a book that I think Joy has got some copies of, which is about living theory research as a way of life. Now, this is the homepage of the Educational Journal of Living Theories. Now, it'll come up in a moment, but we started this in 2008 to provide a forum which still has got to get recognition on Scopus and the other databases. So we're putting in for recognition. But this allows you to create these explanations of your educational influence in your own learning and the learning of others, and also in the learning of the social formations, because your engagement with, for example, in the University of Bath, the Senate put me on a committee to look at the regulations governing research degrees in 2003. Now, for years I've argued that they should be permitted e-media as part of doctoral theses, because it allowed multimedia and visual. Now, we just put forward a recommendation to the Senate after years of trying, and we just said that e-media should be accepted as forms of representation in research degrees. And it went through Senate without any problem at all. So we had years of trying. 2004, Mary Hartog, she's a reader in one Middlesex university. She was the first to go through with a multimedia PhD, looking at her own tutoring with video. But you might find you've got to engage with the social formations of which a university is one to change the nature of what regulates, what governs, what can actually be submitted. Now, could I just then move on, because I do think I hope, communicated something which I'm passionate about, just as you are, with that energy. I've agreed, very much so. The emotions are really important, and the I should be included. Yeah? But let me just then focus on the values that you use to give meaning and purpose to your life and education. Right? Now, if I use the word ontological values, the notion of the ontology is about your way of being. And the values that you use to give meaning and purpose to your life in education are the ones that all of those doctoral theses actually use as explanatory principles. So if I explain my educational and my own learning, I've got to bring in that life-affirming energy. And when I studied philosophy of education, right first, second year of my teaching at the Institute, as part of a master's program, there were philosophers who were saying, and I really enjoyed this, that ethics and education are value-laden and practical activity, value-laden. And they actually demonstrated that their arguments were fallacious, but they tried to demonstrate that justice, freedom, consideration of interests, respect for persons, and democratic procedures were actually the values that educators should be using to make sense of what they were doing. Now, if you think about your values, one of the doctorates is actually focused on a passion for compassion. Compassion. Now, this was in research with Alzheimer's patients and carers, the use of video. And that idea of a passion for compassion from Marian Naidu, along with Liz Campbell being loved into learning, And tomorrow, no, it's later today, we've got a live streaming session for the Educational Technologies scene, where we're bringing in researchers from different parts of the world. And one of them, Jackie DeLong, her doctorate, she's actually focused on being loved into learning, because Liz was one of her students, and it was Liz that explained to Jackie that that was part of Jackie's relationship with her, being loved into learning. But also the development of a culture of inquiry, and also a dialogical way of being. Okay, this idea that actually Jackie requires almost some conversation with others in terms of her feeling that the energy is there, she's got a response to them, and she's actually creating, again, an explanation which is focused on a dialogical way of being. Now, can I just ask, because I'm going to stop in a couple of minutes, is there anything that you can just say, yes, when I think about what moves me, and a Soviet psychologist said, we can only weakly, we only weakly understand energy with motivation, right? Energy and values, energy and meaning. He said, we don't really know how to represent the relationship between those of energy, a flow of energy, the flow of energy with values, with meaning, and how that links to motivation. And that's what all of those doctrines are trying to show, how you can merge them. You know, it's energy. Now, would you please just think a little about, if you were to think of a value that you bring in, because each one of you here has got a unique constellation of values that helps to constitute who you are. Everybody here clearly is different, so there is diversity. And that notion, each one of you has got this constellation of values. Do you have anything that you could just say, yes, I'm aware that I've been motivated for years to sustain, if you like, my motivation, my passion for education. Have you got a sense about what that and those values are? Have you got any that you could just share with us? Is there anything that you're feeling, yeah, this is what I value?
Sorry.
Anybody?
I was going to say hope.
Yeah, yeah. Crucial one. Yeah, and we've got there love and hope in terms of one of the doctrines.
Right.
Yeah, hope, vital, yeah.
I do a lot of work with non-traditional learners, so a lot of them are teaching assistants and they do the degree part-time in the evenings, and it's really hard work for them, it's hard work for us too, but it's so rewarding because you see how they grow, and as a result that helps you grow as well, so it's kind of a shared experience that you have with them. And I just saw an email last night from one of the students saying, thank you for the course, I couldn't have done it without you, and all that stuff. It just gives you that warm feeling, doesn't it?
And it's not getting on the inside of that shared, that sense of hope is vital to so many. And yet, where is it in your own research, or not your, but you look in the journals, and it's not just the words, it's a lived, embodied expression, and that's shared, that relational, and you see the energy that you're giving. Yeah. Any others that you feel, yes? Care, yeah. One of the doctoral students at the moment is actually developing that living theory of caring. Care, again, a fundamental value, not just the words, but the lived experience of what motivates you. And care for others, care for oneself. Any others? So we've got hope, that lovely, the relational dynamic between people.
Joy.
Yeah, joy. Does that make sense to you? You want to feel, you are a pleasure to be with today, because I'm in a room where people, in terms of that sense of, the hope. Now, you're only now expressing those values, which I think, this is what I want to bring more fully into the world as an academic explanation of influence, educational influence. I want to see it in the journals, these multimedia journals. Any others? Because we've got, the care, the hope. Joy is particularly interesting. One of the videos which I had to show you was me with a doctoral student, and it was Jackie DeLong, and suddenly you can see there's an explosion of laughter and the energy, and it carries that hope, it carries the relational dynamic, but also the joy, the real pleasure in terms of what it is we're actually talking about. And she'd heard me talking to one student on the phone, and I'd said to him, Jeff, oh gosh, yeah, Jeff, you're showing such wisdom, you know, in your thesis. And Jackie heard this and said, you're not going to tell me I'm using wisdom, are you? You know, and I just immediately got like, no. You know, and the laughter at that moment, you'll just see there was a lovely relationship between us, which actually was part of me explaining. It was all about the abstract to her doctoral thesis, and we had to change it in 5 days. And she moved it from something which I had to say, look, Jackie, this won't do, it's just not. 5 days later, she had an abstract which she could submit. Now, it was part of that relational dynamic that I could actually explain my influence using that video. Are there any others that you're feeling, before I must finish it, any others that you're feeling on it, yeah?
So community.
Community.
Value community.
Yeah, crucial. And you'll hear, I think, from both maybe Marie, but certainly Joy tomorrow, Joy Manta, will be looking at community, you know, as part of her doctoral inquiry into the communities of learners, and that's really vital. Now, coming to that, is there anything else? Or okay? Well, please, as I say, you know the website, actionresearch.net. I put the arguments to support what I've been saying are in the paper, which you can freely access. You've got the evidence, because I use my website literally as a data archive with all of those doctorates, you know, so I can back up the claims that I'm making with that sense of evidence base. Are we okay?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, do it.
So, what I'm hearing from you is that you are asking the question, where are the values that are really important to us as educators? Where are they in the field of educational theory and studies and so on? And what is your answer?
Well, it is for you to have the courage, and this is not easy, to produce validated explanations of your influence, which you've been doing, but even within your 4 books that you've got out with the Living Theory group in Ireland, there are certain qualities missing, because Maureen is also on the EJOTS committee, and on the video, when you see Maureen yesterday, the energy that Maureen was actually expressing, it's to have the, and this is not easy, because if you do this, you will be, unfortunately, questioning the dominant view of what counts as educational knowledge. So what I'm suggesting you do is act with prudence. So you don't act in a way which gets you removed from the discourse within, for example, your organisations. I nearly did this at the University of Bath, so I know what it means. So act with prudence, but it is to try to suggest that you never lose sight of the importance of, for example, with Maureen, the joy, the hope that is there in your relationship. And I've been stressing with Maureen how with Mary Roach and Catriona MacDonald and also Bernie Sullivan, that those 4 women have all got their living theory theses from Limerick University, that it would be lovely, I thought, to get more documented evidence of the sense of community and the relational dynamic between them as they've been doing this work with the Network of Educational Action Research in Ireland for many years. But you've done it together, and there's been a wonderful relational dynamic between them, but I'm just hoping we can find ways of communicating what is at the heart of what you've been able to accomplish. Are you okay? Okay, well, many thanks indeed, because it's Marie now, so it's Marie Huxtable who's brilliant. Well, thank you. Oh, what's it?
No, I'm just going to keep going.
Joy was just holding up that book, which I think is a conference price of £10, is it? Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay, Marie?